Welcome to the And Still a Wrestling Podcast, episode 1. We're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and why we started this podcast, our trip to the AEW Collision event, some SummerSlam thoughts, the Elite contract signing, and a little bit of controversy with women's wrestling. But before we do, let's get this show started.
Welcome to the And Still a Wrestling Podcast, your weekly podcast covering the latest in the world of professional wrestling.
Welcome in again, the And Still a Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan, and this is episode 1 of our very first. I mean, that is the pilot episode if you're starting a new series, and that's what we're doing today. I've done podcasts before. I've done college football. I've done Clemson football, but I've never done wrestling, but always wanted to do so. And I brought in some friends that I'll introduce to you now to talk a little bit wrestling because it's something that I've loved as a kid, but now I have some friends that I can share it with. So let me introduce some of our co-hosts here. Kevin, welcome in.
Hey, Morgan. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. Kevin is a guy I've known for a couple of years. We've done some work together. Kevin, I appreciate you being a part of the episode and hopefully many more to come.
Yes, sir. Happy to kick this off and tell our story a little bit. Just sit here and riff on pro wrestling, one of my big-time passions for sure.
Yeah, and not only joining myself and Kevin, we also have Drew down here to talk some of his passion as well in the wrestling industry. Welcome in, Drew.
Thanks, Morgan. How are you?
Pretty good. So obviously this is episode 1. We wanted to get this underway to just talk about why we're here, really. And I'll just kind of start with myself. Wanted to start this podcast just because I love wrestling. I'm actually, I would say, more of a casual wrestling fan. I don't know as much as the other guys here, Kevin and Drew. You'll be able to hear from them and get their insights. And they've definitely been around the industry a lot longer than I have. I would say, again, I'm really going to play the host, but let these experts get in and give you their thoughts. But for me, I'm a WCW fan, grew up that way, watching wrestling with my dad, and then kind of took a little bit of a break for a few years, maybe even almost a decade of a break, and just recently got back into it watching AEW. And I can say that I've actually watched every single AEW episode, even though I don't think I can remember every single episode like Kevin and Drew can, but I have watched every single AEW episode. WWE, not as familiar with. The other promotions, not as familiar with, but I'll try to give you my thoughts as I can. Kevin, why don't we start with you? What about you? How did you start in wrestling and what's your expertise?
Wow. So I will say I probably started in early 1981, 82. Having been born and raised in New England, I was brought up on WWF back in the day of Pedro Morales, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund. As a kid, I was fortunate enough to go to the Boston Garden numerous times to see the likes of Andre the Giant. Like I had said, Pedro Morales. I think I even saw Captain Lou Albano wrestle, the Great Fuji. However, as I got older, I realized that product wasn't necessarily what I was really into. I preferred something a little bit more edge. So as I got older, into my mid to late teens, I started to look at alternatives like WCCW. At the time, it was an alternative. It was something that was on programming opposite of my local channel's WWF at the time. And I started to realize that there's a lot more out there and there's a lot more believable. It was easier for me to suspend disbelief when I watched two guys kick the living shit out of each other, or at least I thought they did. So from there, that kind of morphed into learning a little bit more about indie federations, New Japan. I got turned on to the Von Erichs. I learned more about the NWA, and I happened to come across my still to this day favorite all-time pro wrestler, the legendary Ric Flair. Woo! There is no other. So yeah, as I get into my 20s, I discovered ECW. Being in New England, it was an easy trip for me to get down to Philadelphia. So I have been fortunate to be at a lot of important ECW events. I was even there during the mass transit incident, not that I'm all that proud of, because that was definitely freaking scary, but I was there. Later on, that turned into fascination with New Japan. And then I would say that I left the WWF entertainment industry as far as following that and started looking into like a New Japan, more of a shoot, work, shoot. And then that has grown into what we know now as AEW. A lot of those guys and a lot of those stars have transitioned from New Japan and either to starting AEW or, as we know, into WWE current day. And that brings me up to right about now. So I will say that I don't watch WWF anymore. It's just not my thing. I will on occasion catch some important pay-per-views. I saw a few matches at WrestleMania. But for the most part, I am New Japan, GCW. I even watched a little Hood Slam, and then, of course, AEW. And that's me.
Well, I appreciate that, sharing a little bit of background about yourself. And that's how Kevin and I kind of got hooked up watching AEW together, watching the pay-per-views together. And then joining us at those events because we're all kind of live in the same area was Drew. Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So it's like I'm a little younger than Kevin. I've been pro wrestling fan since probably about 1991. I grew up, I was a kid, grew up in the thing. And you watch your Saturday morning cartoons. And I remember after the cartoons were over, you get the 11 o'clock hour, which would have the WCW Worldwide or something like that. And then WWF Superstars would come after that. And, one of the perspectives, I always think about is dude, I was a teenager when the Monday Night Wars and everything are going on. So it's not only just the fact that that's some of the best we ever got in pro wrestling, but it is I'm 16, 17, 18 during this time. It's the most impressionable thing in the world. I was that kid that, Saturday, it's I'm watching every episode of Shotgun Saturday Night at 11 o'clock because, I've got nothing else going on, I guess, at the time. And realizing, oh man, it's just absorbing nothing but nonstop wrestling. And, I carried out there. I heard Kevin say he got off the WWE train at some point, and I'm the one that just never got off the WWE train. I was, like I said, again, a big fan of WCW back in the day as well, but I guess I'm always the WWE is the main thing, I guess, for me. It's I also know how you mentioned Ric Flair was your guy, so I guess I should give the forward right off the bat that if we're going to talk any of the classic wrestling or something like that, just be prepared for the fact I am a Bret the Hitman Hart apologist. He does no wrong, and I'm going to come up with millions of excuses on why he's the greatest wrestler of all time in my book. And it is just for slight context too. It's Kevin's my neighbor, so we got to talking wrestling. He words it as his religion. And I'm just, like I said, I've been absorbed by it for majority of my life, man. So it's an easy talk for me.
Definitely an easy talk for you guys.
Don't pull that curtain back too far, Spence.
Not going to.
So, Drew, let me ask you this. One thing that you didn't mention. So you mentioned your favorite wrestler, Bret the Hitman Hart. He mentioned Ric Flair. I didn't say mine. I'll go ahead and say mine is The Rock. And growing up watching him, even though I did say earlier that I didn't really watch WWE, but he was definitely that guy where whenever he came out, I around the living room pretended to be just like him, pretended to climb the rope, but I was climbing the back of the chair and the couch. And so that was me. But even earlier was the yellow and red Hulk Hogan. When Hulk Hogan turned to NWO, which you're wearing an NWO shirt. If it's on the podcast, nobody can see that, but
yeah,
but you're wearing one. So when he turned to the NWO, I was playing Little League baseball, and my dad, I was in left field, and my dad told me through the fence, and I started crying because I was so sad that my my favorite wrestler had turned bad guy, because it was real to me, and it's still real to me to this day. But at that time, as a little kid, 9 or so years old, I was like freaking out, like, how could my favorite wrestler do this? But then as I got older, I started getting into The Rock, and now I guess you could say would probably be for me would be Kenny Omega. But one thing that you didn't say, Drew, was how many belts do you have? I know you have like an entire room dedicated to the belts that you have.
Look, man, when you get old enough and you've got yourself well, set up in life and you have disposable income, it's like you start buying the dumb, frivolous things. And that was my dumb, frivolous thing. Was I was like, it's my best friend and I, Rob, like, we've always grown up like talking about how cool certain belts are, how, designs and everything. And it's always been a big thing with us. And finally, I remember like 2020 was around the time that, like, right before the pandemic hit. I sent a text to Rob where we found like this one website that sells the WWF tag team titles. And it was like total, I think, like close to about $500. And I'm looking, I was like, that's $250 a piece, man. Like, we could do this, couldn't we? He's like, yeah. And then I got into it. I have, by myself, I probably have about 8, but like in total between, like, Rob's picked up way more than me, but like if you count between the two of us, it's somewhere around 25 championships.
So I just want to call it the first 12 minutes. We've got Morgan, who's saying his prayers, taking his vitamins, white meat baby face. And we've got Drew telling us about how rich he is and how many belts he owns. So he's totally the heel. We're totally setting this right up off the bat, boys.
Sir, it's like, sir, none of us are in any position to talk about how rich one other is. It's like,
well, I think it'll be a good combination. And that was one of the reasons why we started this, is because we do enjoy wrestling, and really, like, we all have a different perspective and a different amount of experience in in being a fan of wrestling. So hopefully it's something fun and interesting that you can listen to as well. Because we felt like there needed to be another podcast out there, and still the Champion of Champions podcast. Hopefully one day we can be that, but we'll start with episode 1. Now, we've already done our intro. I promised you an intro. I promised you why we're doing this. Hopefully you kind of get that and familiar with us a little bit. And we'll continue with this kind of round robin style where I'll kind of kick it off and then go from there. Again, because I'm probably the novice in the group, I'll just kick it off. But we did have something fun that like I said, we get together, we watch AEW pay-per-views very often together at one of our houses and enjoy that. But then recently AEW came close to home in Greenville, South Carolina. And so we made the trip out there to watch it in person. And this was actually the first AEW Collision in Greenville at the Bon Secours Wellness Arena. Crazy. We went to see. It was kind of a good trip for the whole day, honestly, because we went to Toy Federation, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's in Greer, where they have all these old toys and just nostalgia everywhere, man. You just see, like, I went in to look at the wrestling toys because it was a wrestling event for us for that day, but I kind of got trapped in the Ninja Turtle section. I don't know if you guys had any one section that you liked the most, but just quickly, what was your thoughts on Toy Federation and the wrestling stuff they had, or what maybe caught your eye there?
First of all, I'm disappointed in you not picking up that Hulk Hogan figure, from the 80s. What was it? Wasn't LJN blue?
I can't believe I didn't keep it when I was a kid. I mean, it's like $40 now. Why didn't I keep that thing? I could have made $40.
I felt the same way because there's the pack of Demolition, and they come with the helmets, and I'm like, God, I had that. What did I do with it?
So, Kevin, is there anything that at the Toy Federation that caught your eye, or did you just enjoy just browsing the different figures they had?
Yeah, collecting toys really isn't my thing, but it's pretty cool to see all the nostalgia stuff. It's funny. I look back. I'm not of the age that there was like action figures that we played with per se. I remember there being like a $6 million man and G.I. Joe, but that was pretty much it. Action figures, in my opinion, really didn't become a thing till like my brother's generation. So like the early 80s where you got your He-Man, your TMNTs, and then your wrestling dolls and what have you. So yeah, it's interesting for me to see. And there are a couple of things. I am a Batman fan, so there was some Batman stuff there, but I thought it was interesting. But I don't think we should plug Toy Federation until they become a sponsor. So,
Yeah, they're not a sponsor yet. So, but that did start off our day. And then we went in to watch AEW Collision. Now, I'm not a big Ring of Honor guy. I never really watched any of it. I didn't realize that Ring of Honor and AEW were so connected. I obviously knew that Tony Khan had purchased Ring of Honor, but as far as connected, what I meant was that a lot of the star wrestlers of AEW are former like guys that worked their way up through Ring of Honor. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't have the actual list of Ring of Honor matches that were there, but Drew, we'll start with you. Any thoughts on just kind of the promotion of Ring of Honor that's last Saturday and how they did?
I was actually going to look. It's like Kevin would give you a better backstory. I know my like Ring of Honor of the day, but I'm pretty sure Kevin might be more diverse in that stuff. I know it's like it was good to see. I definitely got the vibe that like it has. I don't know if it has the same vibe as the original like Ring of Honor did, but it's like it definitely felt the vibe of like the other AEW show. Like how with Dynamite they filmed Rampage, and that's what it feels like here. It was like when they filmed Collision, this is their version of Rampage. It's just Ring of Honor and stuff. It definitely has the old school vibe to it in the sense of like we're here for exhibition matches to show off, like how they did it back in the 80s and the 90s, where it's our star against enhancement talent, get them over that way. Not really much on storyline, but just you're here for wrestling. It's like, and Ring of Honor was always kind of good at that.
Now, Kevin had us stay there for the entire event. So not only did we see the first couple of matches before Collision of Ring of Honor, but we stayed until like midnight to see the tail end of the Ring of Honor additional matches, which, I was getting kind of tired. I'm an old soul, so I wanted to go to bed. But what were your thoughts on that?
To Kevin's defense, we had really good seats for this.
Yes, we did. And that's a big thanks to Kevin as well. So Kevin, what's your thoughts on the Ring of Honor portion before we get into the AEW side?
First of all, you got a problem with watching Rhett Titus go over some local ham and egger? What's the problem? You watched WWE Superstars when you were a kid, didn't you? Didn't you see King Kong Bundy come out and squash the local guy in like 30 seconds, then cut a promo and go to commercial? Come on.
Yeah, but back then I could, eat my cereal at the same time. I didn't have anything there for me.
It's not your fault you didn't go to the concession stand.
That's right. I made it out for a beer. That's all I'm going to say. Overall, I thought the Ring of Honor tapings were fine. I didn't think it was anything spectacular, but I wasn't sold anything spectacular. It's a bonus when you go to see a live show. They try to cram as much TV in as possible. So if you figure first match went off at 7:30 and they went dark at midnight, that's quite a bit of wrestling. It's quite a bit of content. So they probably got 2 episodes of their Ring of Honor TV, which is on the Honor. What's the name of the Honor
Club?
Honor Club.
Yep,
thank you. We did get to see Dalton Castle and Drew popped, so that was good. But
which
yeah,
I did like his little promo, like his entrance to the ring, and he used the guys that wrestled earlier as some of his prop boys.
The boys.
He's such a white meat baby face. That's his gimmick. That's his gimmick. The boys. The boys also wrestle as a tag team. They're twins. They're pretty damn good. But yes, it was good to see. And I cracked on Rhett Titus. I remember when he was like really, really young and green. It was good to see he's in fantastic shape and had a decent match. But overall, it wasn't the best night. I mean, let's face it, we were watching some C-level talent against some B-level talent. I thought that seeing Paul Ellering's daughter go against Athena was pretty good. I think she has potential. I think she is probably either going to be under contract or maybe has a temporary contract for Ring of Honor. But she's been around for a while. She's been paying her dues for at least 2 or 3 years. I've seen her a few times. That's really what stood out. I enjoyed the boys, the Dalton Castle match, and Rachel Ellering I thought was pretty good.
I was going to say that too. It's like, it's like, we'll see level talent. I was like, well, I don't, it's like, we got Dalton Castle and Athena out of it. And I hate to say this, but I've kind of noticed a pattern with AEW with like, who are the A and B level talent that you see on Ring of Honor. We're probably going to put them on the AEW show.
Yes. Which is just another booking mistake in my opinion, but hey, we're not gonna go too far off on that. We'll save that for another episode.
And you guys know, I mean, I like Dalton Castle's gimmick. I really enjoy watching him wrestle. I didn't realize how big the dude was. On TV, he doesn't look that big, but he's a pretty big dude. And I'm not a big. I do like Athena's finisher. I think it's pretty cool off the top rope, but I'm overall not super big on her. If she never, had the belt, it wouldn't really bother me at all. I just don't have a big passion for watching her wrestle, but obviously she's made a name for herself on the Ring of Honor side. She's the champ there, so more power to her there. So let's get into the AEW Collision, and I kind of brought up the results just to kind of remind me, even though I was there, just kind of remember how the matches went. But one of the best matches, really, I actually cheered for the bad guys, the heels in this group, which was totally against my norm because I would normally cheer for FTR, but FTR versus Brian Cage and Big Bill, for the AEW World Tag Championship. I thought it was a great match. I actually felt like all the guys did really well. Obviously, FTR always puts on a great show, but I like seeing Big Bill and Brian Cage get some airtime, and I do feel like that they're, kind of forgotten about at times, but obviously they're huge dudes. I mean, the guy's like 7 foot freaking tall, right? Or however they say that back in the day, but
you can't teach that.
And you cannot teach that, right? So I do like Big Bill. He does play up the crowd pretty well. Obviously he's massive, so it's just cool to see him move around. He actually is pretty agile for his height, and then Brian Cage, the same thing. I mean, that dude's pretty agile for a guy that's like, obviously just huge, jacked up. I kept asking him if he was natty or not. He never responded though. But
nice.
But Drew, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that tag team match?
A point I will eventually get around to on this one and stuff is like Brian Cage has always come off of me as like this weird anomaly. Like for whatever reason, like I feel like the guy should be way more over than he actually is. And I can't for the life of me figure out how Vince in his WWE, doesn't want someone like Brian Cage, because he is like physically he checks every single box that that dude's all about.
And Drew, to that point, so doesn't his wife on social media.
Yeah, it's like I've heard the legends of what his wife can be a semi-loose cannon on social media. It's been some interesting contract situations, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, but that's right. She thinks a lot more than most people do.
Yeah. Again, I'm super. It's like with Big Bill, it's like, dude, I'm super happy he's doing as well as he is right now. Considering that he kind of had post WWE, he had some, issues. It's like he got all that turned around, and he's honestly doing probably some of his best work in wrestling right now. And it's like if he gets a push in AEW, I'm all for that. FTR doing fine. It's like, like you said, they're always going to put out a really good match. It's like I'm sure as you guys caught, there was the throwback with what was it? Dax wearing the Midnight Express jacket of Dennis Condrey, who was in the audience with us that night. Which is like, it's funny because they advertise like, oh yeah, former Midnight Express member Dennis Condrey's here. And it's like, and we knew because like it didn't take Kevin, but maybe like 10 minutes we were in there. It's like that dude behind us. It's like,
oh yeah, I think he spotted him like from the entrance all the way down.
I knew who it was. I just couldn't remember his name. So once I put the 2 and 2 together, it was maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But the cool thing was we had better seats than he did.
We really
We actually
didn't
did.
we?
I would
Like,
say
what,
one thing that was interesting, like I said, maybe the reason why I went away from cheering for FTR is because literally everyone else was. I mean, them being from, I think, the Asheville area. Kevin, you've told me that in the past. Like these guys are born and raised and wrestled around here before they made any money doing it. So after the match, and when I stopped kind of picking a side, it was really cool to see them, kind of walk to the side and kiss their family, give hugs and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. And obviously Wheeler's mom slapping Big Bill was pretty cool as well.
Side note,
Yeah,
too,
I think it was.
it's like they advertised also after that match. If you remember, it's like the next couple of matches they're going to do with, it's like, aren't they? It's like, this is where we found out at All In they're going to face the Bucks.
Yeah. It looks like they're going to be in a program with the Bucks. I think it was cool that their family was there. You had Cash's mom in the front row, which set up the slap. And then you also had off camera, you have Dax's wife, his daughter, which I thought was pretty cool. And the whole thing they did off air with Dennis Condrey was awesome. You can probably see that. I know you can. You can see it on YouTube. But let's set the table. This night was against SummerSlam. So you knew we weren't getting an A+ show. We went from, and Morgan, I'm going to rely on your memory here. We went from almost 780,000 views a week ago Saturday night to 360,000, give or take, if I'm not mistaken, for last Saturday night. So, I mean, that hurts when you're looking at numbers and you do half the business. I wasn't expecting much, and I was pleasantly surprised with the FTR match. I thought that it went a decent amount of time. I think it went about 15 minutes, give or take. It was nice to see everybody bump around. And yeah, to your point, I think Big Cass is doing a good job. I don't think he can speak very well. So I think, but having Prince Nana as his mouthpiece, it's probably good for a guy like him until he can either get some mic skills or they just continue to pair him with a manager. Brian Cage is your typical big guy. He's not physically tall, but he's physically wide. And there's always going to be a place in the business for a guy like that. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good match. Predictable, but good.
I'll ask you one last question here, Kevin. It's like when you talked about how Big Bill can't talk, it's like, do you think they go and get Enzo?
I think he's too much of a loose cannon. And plus, I think that ship has sailed. His iron is no longer hot. Hasn't been hot since 2016, 2017. Yeah. And he just has way too much baggage. I mean, if you look, he just got let go within the last 6 months from like a D-level federation. I'm trying to remember who it is at the top of my head, but I can't. But yeah, I don't see that happening at all.
Fair.
And let's face it, the better talent of the two was him, both I thought in ring and on the mic, but unfortunately the guy drinks his own Kool-Aid, so he's never going to go anywhere.
Now, do you guys want to go through every single match of the night or just kind of hit some of the bigger ones? Because I can just go to the next one, which...
Go ahead and give the card rundown, and we'll speak to it if there's something that I feel like speaking to, or Drew feels like speaking to, or you want to expound on.
Yeah, sure. So the next one was the TBS Championship match on the women's side. Chris Statlander and Mercedes Martinez matched up. Obviously, Statlander would win that match. I feel like, and it kind of goes to what our later topic will be, but I feel like as a whole, women's wrestling gets way more criticized than men's wrestling. And it's not a good thing because it has come a long way from what we used to see from women's wrestling. I mean, I was watching some old stuff just a couple of days ago on YouTube, and I was like, wow, I cannot believe how athletic and gifted and hard, work ethic these girls are putting through their bodies, to get to a level where, I mean, let's face it, they're never going to be as amazing and fast and agile in the ring as a man, but they can bring a ton to the table in their own unique style. But as a booker, it's big time for me to pair the right women up. I don't necessarily know or feel like that Tony Khan does a great job, if it's him, does a great job with pairing the right women up. However, saying that, kind of going backwards on myself here, I do feel like Chris Statlander and Mercedes Martinez was a good pairing in the grand scheme of it, compared to the other things we've seen at AEW. We'll start with Kevin first. What do you think about that match? Do you agree, disagree with my thought?
Actually, I want to talk about the fact that you were going back and looking at bra or panties matches.
Yeah, those were not nearly as athletic, but somehow just very entertaining.
Entertaining, right? You know what? It was what it was. I didn't think it was spectacular. They missed a couple of spots. It's going to happen, but I expected a little bit more out of those two, considering that, Mercedes is very tenured, being from New England, being in the game for a very long time. Statlander's come back in the last 2 to 3 months. This may have been maybe her her maybe 5th, 6th match back. It wasn't bad. It was what it was. I didn't think it was anything special. Andrew?
That's kind of where I stand. I was like, it was good. Maybe I set my standards higher. I did feel like, throughout the match, I was like, man, I feel like this match benefited Mercedes way more than it did at Statlander. It seemed like, did you got that vibe too? That like Mercedes way more offense than Statlander.
Well, I think the experience there is the difference. You probably got, let's say, 12 to 14 years versus 5 years.
Side notes on that match real quick too. It's like, it ends with, Statlander winning. It's like Mercedes doesn't take it very well. You go into a brawl and, Willow came out to save Statlander, but it's like, I don't know who that was that came out to help Mercedes.
It was Diamante. I'm sorry, Diamante. We haven't seen her in probably a year. And why do we need to see her?
Okay, so that I was like, it's no offense to I was just like, wait, who? Like,
I think that's the biggest beef with AEW is that they just throw, it's almost like picking out of a hat sometimes. And I've told you guys this in text message a ton before we started the podcast, and I'll air my grievance on the podcast as well. It does, from a casual fan perspective. I guess I can't even call myself a casual fan because I do watch every single AEW. I'm more of an AEW, neckbeard here, but I would say that it does seem like a lot of the matchups are kind of out of the hat, just okay, whoever's healthy, just throw them in there. And I don't know if that necessarily, translates to anything long term. And that's what really bothers me. Like I said, hopefully they can build on this. This one actually did seem to have something that they were going to continue on now with a tag team matchup to see later on between Diamante, Mercedes Martinez, and then Willow and Chris Statlander, the champ.
Morgan, to that point, you got to hand it to Tony Khan to try to make legitimize. Well, I'll use the word legitimize with the point standings. They kind of did away with this 6 months to a year ago now, where he would show you like legit stats, and that's how you would get your matches. But the problem,
you'd have like a top 5 on Twitter, like almost every week.
Right, and unfortunately, it doesn't work. It's not a real sport. You can't. You can't rank people. Me. Yeah, I mean,
I'm not.
Let me pull that curtain all the way back.
WCW and WWE have done this at some point too, and in both times, it's gone within less than a year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the win and loss record just obviously didn't make any sense. I do feel like they could do a better job with having, the number one contender and making that known a little bit better, and having that person, the lower wrestlers fight for the number one contender spot and really make that more important. I think that would help people like me, but I definitely don't like the win-loss record. It didn't make any sense anyways, and kind of started to show that, people were being favored over others. But going to the next match really wasn't a match, but honestly, this was my favorite part, and it wasn't even a match. It was Toni Storm's promo, where she was like the damsel in distress from, like the 1950s or something, or 40s or whatever. But it was just like really cool. I loved her promo with Tony Schiavone. I thought it was very well done. This just stressed out, diva Hollywood chick. I loved it. Like, Toni Storm has not been somebody that I've been thinking very highly of. I didn't really like her as the champ. I'm big on other girls getting their opportunity. Toni Storm's not been one of those on my list. But after that promo, I was like, wow, I got to put her higher up on my list. I actually feel like I'd like to see more of her wrestle.
To your point, that was my favorite point in the show too, because that's when I got up, went to the bathroom, got a $14 beer, and came back. So yes, I enjoyed that point as well.
Oh, come on. That's disrespectful to Miss Tony Storm there.
I watched it on the replay.
I like that they're doing something. It's like, Tony Storm's always been a good athlete, but it's like, I don't know how far she's come, with like having a personality. And the 50s, washed up actress, not sure, who still believes she still got it. I said, it was refreshing. It was something different. And it's like, and sadly, it's like, it's probably the most, interesting thing to come out of the Outcast angle in probably a couple weeks.
So it really doesn't even jive with that angle, to be honest.
Let's put a bow on that, guys. Think about this. Today is, as we're recording this, it's August 8th. We have 20 days to build to Wembley, and Tony Storm is not going to be in that picture. So you got Hikaru Ishida and you got Saraya, who are going to be the female headline on that pay-per-view, and there's no place for Tony Storm, so you got to put her off in another angle, and that's where she's going.
Makes sense. Now, after that was a squash match between Samoa Joe and Serpentico. Any quick thoughts on that? I mean, it'd be almost kind of weird to talk more than the match lasted, but any thoughts on that?
It was to set up the fact that he wants to call out someone for Wembley, and we know who that is now.
You got a match instead of a mugging. That's all that was. It's like, it was set up Joe versus Punk, and we're all here for it.
Wow.
So I think, do you feel like that was a good build for that?
No, not at all.
No, they have 10-plus year history, and Tony has dropped the ball completely on that angle. He gave us a one-off match that destroyed the history of Ring of Honor for 10 years, and the fact that CM Punk had never beaten Joe, and he basically hot-shotted that and gave us that in 2 weeks and put CM Punk over, because obviously CM Punk is blowing Tony Khan on the side, because that's the only thing I can think of at this point.
Yeah, I did think that was really it just squashed, it killed everything when he beat him a couple of weeks ago. That really frustrated me. Again, from a casual standpoint, made no sense to me why that was the way it was.
And you took a 10-year story, which, again, I think they met, was it 5 times? Joe beating him every single time. You could have made like a complete 6-month story arc out of that and got a payoff at Wembley. But no, we hot-shotted it, and now we got to go back and run it back, hit the reset button. And really, if we think about it, and we look at historical, Tony's created a show because of CM Punk. Tony basically was belittled by his employee at a press conference, and now we're going to put him over at Wembley. I don't understand how Joe's ever going to beat him. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't see CM Punk losing.
Me neither, but it's like, I'm pretty sure they're banking on the idea that it's not who wins and loses, it's can they be the 5-star match.
Yeah, I don't know if both of those guys are in their mid-40s, if I'm not mistaken. So let's face it, the best of their years are behind them. So at this point, it's almost like watching Hogan and Brett in WCW in their late 40s. We saw it. Should we have? I don't know, Brett. You're the Brett, the Brett apologizer. You tell me. Did you think Brett Hogan in WCW was good?
It never happened.
You're right. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's like
they never
Hogan
paid it off.
Brett. It's like it's like any chance you give me to point that out, it's like Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan never was a main event match. It's like Hogan ducks him.
Yeah.
All right, continuing on the card here, we have the AEW's Trios Championship. This one was the House of Black facing off against Top Flight with Action Andretti. I don't really remember much about that, and that's probably the only thing I remember really is that they kicked they kicked what's her name out of the Julia Hart out of the ringside. They barred her from ringside, but I didn't think that Top Flight had any chance, and I don't know. I just didn't feel like they got to showcase much of what they could do, just because you have to keep that idea that the House of Black is just so powerful than everybody else. So to me, it wasn't super interesting of a match.
Yeah, good filler match. I didn't think it was terrible. I like what they do with the arena when they have those guys wrestle. The fact that we got kind of the glitter in the crowd, that was kind of neat. I didn't think it was bad, but it was what I expected. It was a very predictable night. That's the theme of this night. It was very predictable.
Now, I will say that, Drew, do you like how they do the lights? I know you mentioned that while we were there in the seats, like they darken everything and just put all the bright lights right on the ring. You like that?
Yeah, it's like I'm actually a fan of House of Black. I thought this, it's like this is actually one of the more matches where I was really entertained, just because of the fact that like I find it's like from the entrance to like just how they are in the ring. It's like these guys are highly entertaining to me. I think they put them up against it's like a good team to really showcase how fun their matches can be. And oh Lord, it's like next week though. It's like because they've got them defending the trios titles against CMFTR, and that's probably going to be the show right there.
You think that they lose against them or no?
Maybe. Like it's like I mean logically I would say no. I can see Kevin shaking his head no, but it's like I will say this, CMFTR is the first time that like I see them up against somebody. I'm like, okay, well, this is a threat where they might, drop the titles.
But to me, it goes back to like, Kevin, I don't know how you feel about this, but you're going to put your butts in seat guys, CMFTR, and you're going to make them lose just a few weeks before the biggest event of your history. Even if it's a trios match that seems to be meaningless, it's still over a belt, right? I mean,
Kevin, or do they drop the belts to CMFTR, and this is where we go with them, the Elite?
So I don't see them dropping the belt. I don't see any logical reason for them to drop the belt. It just muddies the waters into Wembley. But keep in mind, you have 2 weekends of pay-per-view matches coming up. So things are going to have to change. But I can't see any logical booking reason why you would put the Trios championships on CMFTR. We know that it's too soon for the Elite to mingle with CM Punk. The wound is still fresh. I don't think we're going to get that anytime soon. So I don't see any logical reason. And Morgan, to your point, they'll cheat to win. That's what heels do. So they'll protect the baby faces, keep them strong, but House of Black will cheat.
Yeah, keep in mind.
So I wonder if there'll be someone introduced in that to help them cheat. Obviously, they already have Julia Hart, so.
Yeah, keep in mind in this one, like we talk about, like how can they take an L to the House of Black? It's like, well, the House of Black were the ones who beat the Elite for those titles, so I mean, the credibility is there.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. All right, so we have 2 more matches left, and then we'll get into the other topics of the night. But Metalik versus Jay White. Obviously, it was pretty cool for me to see Jay White in person for the first time. I feel like he's obviously a good wrestler. I don't know much about his background, other than being in the Bullet Club. But I do like his, what is it, like the Gun Club, Bullet Club combo that they have going on with the Bang Bang Club. I actually like that. It makes sense. So I'm curious to see where it'll go. That was kind of just a filler match for me, though.
I enjoyed the match. I was happy to see Jay White live, but my, how the mighty have fallen. This man was the top of the world, New Japan Pro Wrestling, heavyweight champion, and now he's basically having a 10-minute TV match with Grand Metalik, which is a former WWE guy. This just reminds me of like a Shinsuke Nakamura in the WWE, just wasted talent. I don't think that he's found his stride yet. I think they need to get him into a program, but that kid has some talent, and they need to strap the rocket to him. Him and Kenny Omega would tear the place down.
I tend to agree, because I think even you murmured over to me, it's like, wasn't this guy, is like, wasn't he just doing, headlining cards? It's like, and yeah, you're right. Like, as much as I have enjoyed him, it's like, especially since he and Juice Robinson have come to Collision, it's been very entertaining. But the fact of the matter is like, This guy went from like the main event and the most important guy in New Japan Wrestling at the beginning of this year to he's a mid-carder in AEW. Yeah. That's that. Huh?
Yeah, it's too bad. It's funny, that Bang Bang Gang. You could throw the Gun brothers out there as a mid-level tag team, but you've got the job guy in Juice, and then you've got the main event talent in Switchblade Jay White. I'd like to see them better use him. I think they have a gem there, and they just need to put him on the stage. So I enjoyed the match. I was happy to see Jay White live.
Yeah, same here. I was. It's like when I saw that I was getting Jay White, I was super happy about it. It's like I've always wanted to see him, wrestle in person, and I was like, cool. It's like I'm glad to do this.
Which, by the way, I know we're on podcast, but if you ever see me in person one day, some people may say I look like Austin Gunn, but obviously I'm trying to hit the gym a little bit more so I can catch up with him. All right, and then we got the final match of the night, the real World Championship match, the real. All right, CM Punk versus Ricky Starks. With special outside. I thought it was special guest referee. No, it's special outside the ring referee, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And, obviously I think these are the two of the better guys in AEW currently, as far as draw and as far as wrestling talent. As controversial as CM Punk is, I do feel like he's still one of their top performers. And I think Ricky Starks is getting there as well. For me, I enjoyed the match overall. Obviously, I knew that Ricky would not win, of course. And it did have a nice little ending there with Ricky Steamboat getting in and being involved, but it was slowly developed, and I don't think it was really executed properly. And that's what happens when you have a guy just kind of walk in and try to make a match work and then make an interference type thing work. And it seemed kind of rushed, but yet slow at the same time. So it didn't really work at the end for me, but the overall match I really liked. And I do like Ricky Starks. I think he's one of their up and coming talents that they're getting in the right matches. Obviously not his time yet to win. Drew, we'll start with you on this one. Thoughts on the final match of the night?
Okay. First of all, it's like, I'm not going to go into like heavy detail about this. I'll let you all figure out, but it's like, I'm also convinced that when CM Punk came out, he was trolling the Greenville audience in a way that I understood, and I think and I'm just going to say that, leave it at this. It has everything to do with the shirt he was wearing. It's like, I feel like that was a kind of a wink at how do I get like people in this area to boo me, and that it's like. But as far as a match, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic match in the sense of I think it did a great job, making Ricky Starks look good. We kind of gave you the backstory of why Ricky Steamboat is, important to to CM Punk's career, coming from Ring of Honor. And it didn't play out like I thought it was. I thought it was going to be because, Steamboat was the one that's, tried to convince Punk and Ring of Honor that you don't need to cheat, you're that good. And so I thought with him being there, this was going to be a case of, well, Punk's going to do something kind of, sneaky to win the match. And it didn't happen. Instead, he was just there to take a beating from Ricky Starks and get, more heat.
And by the way, we also had an intro of Jim Ross that came down before the match started. That was kind of cool to see him in person as well. I think that might have been for me the first time seeing him in person, especially that close, because if you go back and rewatch, we were maybe 5 feet away from him. At least Kevin was for sure. Obviously we couldn't hear him because we were there in the arena, but Kevin, your thoughts on the final match of the night?
So first of all, welcome back, JR. Happy to see him back in the booth. Regarding the match, I think first and foremost, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that CM Punk saying he is the real world's champion is short-sighted, shitty booking. I think that anybody who goes out on injury with a championship and relinquishes the belt can claim that. So my point and my ask right now is what's going to happen when Thunder Rosa comes back? She did the exact same thing. Is she going to take a fake belt and say, I'm the real women's champion? Short-sighted, lazy booking. However, I get it. Collision needs a quote-unquote champion, so you can get a quote-unquote real world champion. That match was meant to do one thing, and that was to solidify Ricky Starks as a heel, and that's exactly what happened. Having him beat down Ricky Steamboat in Greenville, South Carolina, solidified the fact that Ricky Starks is on his way to being a mega heel. I thought the match was good. I thought it went 20 some odd minutes. I thought it was entertaining. And I think they went off the air strong. I think it did what it was supposed to do. So, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was just thinking about the end of the actual match where this Ricky got in there. Ricky Steamboat got in there and kind of counted the guy out. But then, as you mentioned, Ricky Starks, on the other hand, pulled his belt off of him and started to whip him. And to me, that was really emotional. For the fans, did not like it at all. And it really gave him that heat that he needed to, like you said, kind of take his next step, towards the next level that he has. Drew, any thoughts on Ricky whipping Ricky?
I mean, like I said, it was just a way to get, it's like a lot of this match was good for being good, but it was to get certain things over. Beating up Ricky Steamboat, that's to get Ricky Starks over. The Real World Championship, yes, is a way to get CM Punk over. Which, if I can go into the Real World Championship for a second here, it's like I don't understand where they're going with that, because I thought the objective was to get us to him having that belt and MJF having this belt. And then All In is about Adam Cole and MJF. And I feel like I don't know if I make a big deal about this Real World Championship if the program is MJF and Adam Cole. I just don't know why we're doing this right now.
I will add one more thing. So the finish of that match, for me, fell flat. I think, and I don't want to talk ill of the elderly, but Ricky Steamboat was about 3 seconds off, and CM Punk had Starks pinned for over 7 seconds before Ricky Steamboat counted. So that kind of just didn't sit well with me. But again,
yeah, it definitely hurt. For
missed
sure.
the spot. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad timing.
So that was basically our recap of the AEW, the most recent AEW Collision episode, and the one that we were actually there. That's why it's so important to us, because we got to see it in person. Overall, friend to friend, it was a good trip, good day to hang out with each other and go enjoy some wrestling live in your hometown. But again, it was up against SummerSlam. That's never going to be the best recipe, and you're never going to get the best matches because you already know you've lost, unfortunately, in that scenario. And that's what leads me to, before we get into SummerSlam, but I just wanted to say one other thing. It does worry me. I mentioned earlier in the show that I do a college football podcast. It does worry me a ton that they're going to continue this Saturday night thing, and we're getting 30 days in, getting close to being 30 days before college football starts. And in the Southeast, college football is king. And so you're going to get millions and millions of viewers going to that. And I think, at least for me, I'm one that likes both, but maybe there's still a set of people who don't care about college football and will still watch.
No, I genuinely want to get into that at another time too, because I feel like that's a subject we need to touch on, is that, there's going to be Collision going against AEW is going to be up against college ball. And I think with Collision this time being up against SummerSlam, I think that really is just like a taste of things that are going to come to Collision's ratings around October and September and November.
Now, Kevin and I, we didn't really watch SummerSlam in depth. I watched some of the SummerSlam highlights on Twitter, and I can kind of give you some thoughts on that. But Drew, I know that's kind of your wheelhouse, so we'll pass it on to you here. Best match of the night, worst match of the night, thoughts overall on SummerSlam once you got home and watched it.
Okay. Best match of the night. And I definitely think one of the good takeaways from SummerSlam was Gunther and Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental title was a fantastic, it's that straight British European smash mouth, type of wrestling match. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. Gunther going over is big because I feel like this match in particular was the last obstacle in what is probably going to be a historic thing in WWE or wrestling in general, which is that Gunther's probably going to surpass Honky Tonk's Intercontinental title reign, which I guess would make him the greatest Intercontinental champion of all time. Worst match on the card. It really wasn't a terrible card in sense. It's like I hate saying this, but it's like well, definitely like, okay, the match that fell flat to me was Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey doing their, MMA rules fight. It was cool trying something, and I thought, it's like, hey, maybe they can pull it off. But like from certain things in the past, like the Brawl for All being an example, it's like when we try to make pro wrestling feel, more shoot fight-ish and stuff like that, it never really pans out well. I definitely will say on that one, it's like Baszler beating Rousey, the right person went over because Rousey's not going to be back ever. If you talk to a lot of people, and I feel like this is, if I can bring something up quick with SummerSlam, is the tribal combat match that was the main event really kind of did not meet a lot of people's expectations. It's like it was advertised as tribal combat, which I assume meant, all right, we're going to see just, crazy, stuff like that. And the match spends a really, really large amount of time at the beginning of it just being your average wrestling match. It's like it took this match so much longer to shift gears. And I'm sure as anybody who's watched SummerSlam is definitely at this point where like with, the surprise being that Jey Uso, has Roman beat. He goes for the splash. He gets the 1, 2, and he's yanked out of the ring. And the person who yanked him out of the ring is his brother Jimmy. And, immediately from our perspective as wrestling fans, it's like, this made no sense whatsoever. If you followed the Bloodline storyline, like Jimmy turning on Jey doesn't make the slightest bit of sense whatsoever. But as we pointed out, it's like the way the Bloodline storyline has been, it's like I have to go to Friday to SmackDown in order to give them the benefit of the doubt. But speaking my mind here, it's like if it turns out it's one of those cases of Jimmy is jealous of Jey for some reason, I kind of feel like that's going to be not just in my opinion, but like in other people's opinion, like this is where the Bloodline has jumped the shark.
I was just going to ask you if you thought it had jumped the shark. From what I heard, they're just trying to elongate the story because they've got lightning in the bottle and they're trying to get it to flash as long as it possibly can. There was a press conference afterwards, and they asked Paul Heyman, it's like, where are we in the storyline of the Bloodline? And he said, bottom of the third. And I kind of thought to myself, like, if we're not in the 6th inning by now, we're gonna lose this. It's like, it's one thing, I get it that you want to prolong this, but look, how do I word this nicely? It's like, as a Simpsons fan, I know it's like you want something, just because you want something to go on forever doesn't mean it's a good idea for the thing to go on forever. Maybe there needs to be a conclusion here.
As a Simpsons fan, I like that.
Fight forever. Fight forever.
So from social media, this is what I check in on. Okay. Cause like I said, I watched WWE, actually, honestly, I watched every episode, for probably the 2 years before COVID and then all during COVID. And then I just kind of gave up on it. Honestly, where I gave up on it, Drew, is all the cuts, especially during COVID, man, you would be watching a 5-minute match and there would be almost 5 million cuts. And it just really made my head hurt. I just couldn't handle it. So I had to stop. And the way that AEW was handling the broadcast was better, at least the way that I liked it visually.
That whole cut thing is a Bruce Pritchard create action. So by moving the camera angle so much, it creates even more action when there isn't that much action in the ring. He's talked about it numerous times.
I know that it's a method to the madness, but I can't say I like it. But on the
Sure.
social media side of things,
Nope.
I've got 3 points. Logan Paul is actually good.
Yes.
Point number 2, Finn Balor never going to be a champ again. Point number 3, are we really bored of the bloodline now? Was it Sami Zayn that carried it the whole time? So that's the 3 social media points. Do you agree, disagree with those 3?
Let me just think through them. It's like, first, what was the first one?
So the first one is Logan Paul is actually pretty good.
Yes, it's not something we're happy as wrestling, especially WWE fans. They're not happy about this. We're not, excited to admit it, but the man is talented. The man is putting up really decent matches and performances. And and honestly, like the first couple of times he was out there where he's kind of trying to play the celebrity who's also, just cashing in on fame, wasn't really good. When he figured out how to embrace being a heel, it got that much better. And he's really good at this. It's not something we're happy
Give the guy
about.
credit. Give the guy credit. He had a SummerSlam match, jumped on a jet, flew from Detroit to Texas, and made it to his brother's pay-per-view to be able to walk him out in his brother's fight. So hey,
Oh wow,
he's still in
that's
his year.
Yeah, he was. Yep, with the black eye and all.
Yep.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you know what? I got a lot of respect for the guy, even though he's one of those YouTubers out there. But that's kind of how I got my start too. But all right, the next one was Finn Balor losing to Seth Rollins, not getting the heavyweight championship, the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Does this mean that kind of Finn Balor's kind of never going to make the top again?
I don't know if he'll never make it top again. I will tell you, it's like I was thoroughly convinced when we were when I was with the guys and we were putting in predictions for SummerSlam, I thought for sure this is it. Like Balor is got to go over here. Now granted, I thought it might be a very short reign. I had this idea that Balor would beat Rollins and maybe Priest would cash in because he has the Money in the Bank case. But I'm with you. It's like I don't know. I can see him maybe making it to the top and maybe getting the world championship at some point. But yeah, this really felt like, man, is this guy ever going to get to the top of the chain again?
He had his chance, and then obviously he got injured by that power bomb to the buckle, right? From Seth Rollins in the person that he was facing in this match. So
yeah, they ran that back too. It's like during the match, it's like it's like Balor made it a deal to go after Seth's shoulder, and then even did the thing where he picked him up and the power bomb, and he threw Rollins into the ringside like that, kind of as a callback to their match. What was it, 2016, 2017?
So I wanted to get to our last topic, and this is kind of more a controversial topic, and we'll end it for the night for our episode 1 here. But I'll let Kevin have the stage here because this is one I feel like he's very passionate about and also has the most backstory on. I came into this women's wrestling controversy. I came into it seeing things on Twitter about the fact that Britt Baker had a terrible match with Ty Valkyrie. And I'll agree. I watched that match. I felt like Britt Baker was not her best. I don't know if she's sick or injured or what. She doesn't physically look her best, and she didn't wrestle her best. And I got to say, she kind of deserved some of the punishment she got from that match. Now, I thought that's where I saw some of the criticism, and she was kind of, fighting back and forth on social media about it. But then we started to get more into the backstage stuff on social media, and that's kind of where I wasn't as familiar. So, Kevin, give me some backstory here. Why are we here? What got us here, and what are your thoughts on it?
So, I guess I'll first start with, we live in a very woke society, and I think that that's a good thing, but I think in some scenarios it's not the best thing. Unfortunately, this business is a big person business. And when I say that, I don't mean heavy, I don't mean tall, but I mean over 120 pounds. You can't have anyone have a match and have the same impact as, let's say, two 175 to 200 pound guys. You just don't have that physicality with a smaller stature person. It's like watching a Marco Stunt match. The fact that we have to have a women's match on every show just shows that the women aren't ready yet. There are some women who can go, and we know those names. But unfortunately, we are subject to watching a subpar match, like watching two people fresh out of school get their airtime and just make it a popcorn match. Or we get up to go to the bathroom, or we get on social media. We shouldn't have the match just because it's the right thing to do in this day and age, is to put the women's match on TV. I think there was a glaring example of that 2 weeks ago for Blood and Guts. We had a 2-minute Britt Baker match because Tony felt they had to have a women's match. There are women who can go. There's no doubt. Some of the best. Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker in their cage match was fantastic. Quite possibly one of the matches of the year. We've seen Charlotte go. We know she can go. We know Asuka can go. But you can't continuously put these girls or women that are just... they're not ready. There should be another show like an NXT for these younger talents, and not just the women, also the men. But just because they have the ability to put them on national TV doesn't mean they should be. We shouldn't have to sit through a 8-minute miss spot match. We've seen it. We've seen missed timings. We've seen women get hurt. There's no reason for us to weekly have to be put through a subpar match, whether it's two men or two women. It just happens to be that we're seeing a very long rash of subpar female matches. And that's my opinion.
If I can add in here, one of the things I kind of bought into this thing too about the Britt Baker situation, where somebody pointed out, they said, like, it wasn't a good match. I don't know why she isn't improving. It's like, well, if she's only wrestling once a week, maybe, and she's, instead of like getting the matches in, she's working in a, her dentist's office. It's like maybe her improvement is moving at a slower rate than some of these others. And I don't know if that's the case. I kind of questioned it after SummerSlam, because I felt like when I walked, it's like you had Bianca Belair, Charlotte Flair, and Asuka in this match together in a triple threat. And I thought, okay, it's like, if there's any 2-3 women wrestlers who can really put on a match and we're going to get something great, it's going to be this. And even that match felt off. And I don't know if it's just, I don't know if it was ring rust or what, but Charlotte felt way off in this match. Like, she just felt rusty, and it was kind of showing. It's like, God bless her, Bianca Belair did a fantastic job. And, Asuka's Asuka. There's no complaints there. Io Sky, of course, if it's like Bianca Belair won the WWE Women's Championship, which caused, Io Sky to cash in, and now she's the WWE Women's Champion. Again, it's like great talent. Everyone, that was honestly one of the bigger pops of the night too, is everyone was super happy to see her get her, moment and stuff. But, another point you brought in there too was, like they said, the idea that they have to have a female women's match somewhere on the card is like, and I can be okay with that, but I also need Tony Khan to remember that, like, you have a pretty large plethora of women's wrestlers on your roster. And I feel like WWE's also guilty of this. Like, you don't have to have the same women out there every single time. Like, mix it up. Like, I joke about it, like, you go, Britt Baker's not, putting on good matches. Like, well, cool, get Willow Nightingale out there. Or it's like, you haven't used Abaddon once this year. Bring them out. It's like, because Abaddon's a great example, because she's been doing the indies the entire time we haven't seen her on TV. And she's gonna come out there, she's gonna be fresh, and she's probably gonna bring something, new, different, and exciting to to the mat on television.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is and why it has to be that every program has to have a female match on it. Not every program has the Elite on it. Not every program has the Lucha Brothers on it. Let's ease up. Let's get more reps down at the whatever QT Marshall runs as a school. Let's let them practice 2 days before they get put on live TV doing the match over and over and over. Let's get it to the point where we're not seeing botched spots or people get hurt or, a whole host of things. When you are Tony Storm and Hikaru Shida carrying the main event for the TV program and the camera is on you and Hikaru is throwing some of the worst work punches I've seen since I don't know what, that is not what I want to watch. She's missing by 3 inches. And Tony, of course, is selling it as if she's getting wailed on. But come on, man. It just wasn't good. It just wasn't good.
That seems to be a common theme with AEW as well. Like you see somebody getting wailed on and then the production team goes to the wrong camera and then you see like this obvious missing of their head or missing of their neck or, just hitting the turnbuckle. And it's like, all right, you just ruined it for me now. Like this is like, I've wrestled plenty of friends in living rooms, on mattresses, and you can hit people. I mean, you can hit them across the head. You can hit them on the side of the head. You can slow down your punch. You can open-fisted open-handed as The Rock used to do. There's so many techniques that you can do better than completely not hitting them at all and punching like the turnbuckle instead, because that to me is just you really don't see that anywhere else, but you definitely see it weekly on AEW. And then to your point, Kevin, you see these women that obviously they're not healthy or they're not in the right mindset or they just out of practice or whatever, and they're being put in the main event. Like that doesn't make sense at all. Like you can put them on the card, that's fine, but you're going to replace another person that could, or another, duo that could duke it out as a main event to end your show and go off the air with something that's, like you said, going to be botched 5 or 6 times. And then the pin is going to be awkward. And so, you don't even believe the pin at all. Like, that's kind of the frustration I'm getting.
I get that, but you got to understand this. That's also your title match for the show. So that the title match goes on last. And if you're planning to have a championship change and you're going to shoot the confetti off and always remember the last thing that everybody sees is what you remember. And everybody remembered Hikaru Shida winning the championship. So you wouldn't want to put that on at 9:00 at night. You want to go off, but you also want a better quality match to go off the air with. I'll leave it at that.
And I'll add one thing and say is like, because I feel like we're going off on questioning the women and all this stuff. It's like, and to what you were saying too, it's like I'm not going to sit here and give a pass to production here. It's like, WWE's mastered that over the years. Or it's like if something's not, or it's like if something's botching and stuff like that, they use those multiple camera angles to like kind of cover up the fact that like that that punch was off or whatnot. It's like production can't be at the wrong place at the wrong time, in that doesn't help them whatsoever.
I think
to your point, and not to beat up the women there, because I've seen it with Brian Cage and I've seen it with Lance Archer, where they've shown the wrong angle and it looks horrible from a television perspective.
Editing, guys. Editing, production.
All right. Yeah. Well, hey, that was our topics. We got into a ton. We introduced ourselves. We talked about our trip to AEW Collision and to Toy Federation. We talked about SummerSlam thoughts and controversy with the women in AEW and some of the key points from social media on SummerSlam and AEW. I hope you enjoyed this episode, the very first episode of And Still, a wrestling podcast. And we're going to try to do this every week, hopefully get it out to you at the same time weekly if we can. But thank you for being a part of the show and listening in. And on behalf of myself, Kevin, and Drew, we'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Thanks, man.